Hello, my name is Jess and welcome to the Storyteller Fox. Come along and listen to read aloud books, be it for bedtime, story time, or simply to read along. Hello and welcome to the Storyteller channel. In today's story time, I will be reading you a book called Mr. Silly by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Silly by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Silly lives in Nonsense Land, which is a very funny place to live. You see, in Nonsense Land, everything is as silly as can be. In Nonsense Land, the trees are pink and the grass is blue. Isn't that silly? In Nonsense Land, dogs wear hats. And do you know how birds fly in Nonsense Land? No, they don't fly forwards, they fly backwards. It really is a silly place indeed, which of course is why Mr. Silly lives there. Mr. Silly, in fact, lives in quite the silliest looking house you have ever seen in your whole life. Have you ever seen a sillier looking house than that? Now, this particular story is all about the Nonsense Cup. You see, in Nonsense Land, each year they hold a competition, and the cup is awarded to whoever has the silliest idea of the year. Mr. Silly had never won the cup, but each night, lying in his bed, he dreamed about winning it. In order to win the Nonsense Cup, Mr. Silly realized that he would have to think up something remarkably silly. He pondered over the problem one morning at breakfast. Incidentally, you may be interested to know what Mr. Silly was having for breakfast. He was having a cup of coffee, which he put a spoonful of marmalade into. After that, he had a cornflake sandwich, and to finish, he had a boiled egg. But being Mr. Silly, he ate the shell as well. Isn't that a silly breakfast? Anyway, this particular breakfast time, Mr. Silly was thinking how to win that cup. He remembered 2 years ago the cup was won by Mr. Ridiculous. He won by wallpapering his house, which sounds very ordinary, but in fact, Mr. Ridiculous had wallpapered the outside of his house. And Mr. Silly remembered last year when Mr. Foolish won the cup. Mr. Foolish, who was a friend of Mr. Silly's, had won the cup by inventing a car. It was quite a normal car, apart from one thing. It had square wheels. Isn't that silly? Mr. Silly thought and thought and thought, but it was no good. He even had another cup of coffee with marmalade, but that didn't help either. So he decided to take a walk. Off he went, leaving his front door open so that he wouldn't have burglars when he was out. On his walk, Mr. Silly met a chicken wearing Wellington boots and carrying an umbrella. Wouldn't it be silly if you didn't wear Wellington boots and carry an umbrella? He said to the chicken. Meow, said the chicken, because animals in Nonsense Land don't make the same noises as they do in your country. On his walk, Mr. Silly met a worm wearing a top hat, monocle and an old school tie. Wouldn't it be silly if you didn't wear a top hat, a monocle and an old school tie? He said to the worm. Quack quack, said the worm. Next, Mr. Silly met a pig wearing trousers and a bowler hat. Wouldn't it be silly if you didn't wear trousers and a bowler hat? He asked the pig. Moo, said the pig. Isn't that silly? It was in the middle of Mr. Silly's walk that he had his idea. It was a beautifully silly idea, quite the silliest idea he'd ever had. He hurried into town and bought himself a pot of paint and a paintbrush. The day of the great awarding of the Nonsense Cup arrived. A huge crowd assembled in the city square to see who was going to win the cup. The king of Nonsense Land mounted the specially built platform. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the crowd in the city square, "it is my pleasure today to award the Nonsense Cup to whoever has had the silliest idea of the year." "One of the silliest idea of the year," continued the king, "is by Mr. Muddle the farmer. He has managed to grow, of all things, a square apple." The crowd clapped as the square apple was held up by Mr. Muddle for everybody to see. He felt sure he was going to win. "However," said the king, and Mr. Muddle's face fell, "we have had an even sillier idea entered by Mrs. Nincompoop. It was a teapot. Quite the silliest teapot there'd ever been." The crowd broke into thunderous applause. "I therefore have great pleasure," announced the king, "in presenting the Nonsense Cup to—" Just then, he looked up and stopped in astonishment. Now in the middle of the city square, there is a tree. It's always been there, and it was at this tree that the king was looking in astonishment. "What," he cried, "has happened to that tree?" Everybody turned to look. The tree had green leaves, bright green leaves, not pink leaves like all the tree in Nonsense Land, but green. There was an amazed silence. "It was me," peeped up Mr. Silly. "I painted all the leaves green last night when you were all asleep." "A green tree!" exclaimed the king. "Who ever heard of a green tree?" "A green tree!" shouted the crowd. "How silly!" And they started to applaud. Mr. Silly smiled modestly. The king held up his hands. "I think," he said, "that this is the silliest idea I have ever heard of, and therefore I award the Nonsense Cup to Mr. Silly." The crowd cheered and cheered. Mr. Silly went pink with pride. And a bird perched up in the branches of the silly green tree looked down. "Woof," it said, and flew off backwards. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the story. For more exciting stories, please remember to like and subscribe at the Storyteller channel. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to the Storyteller channel. In today's story time, I will be reading you a book called Little Miss Princess by Roger Hargreaves. Little Miss Princess. Little Miss Princess's father was a king and her mother was a queen, which, as I am sure you know, meant that Little Miss Princess was a princess. And because she was a princess, she lived in a castle with 2 rats and a moat, a very big castle. And because she was a princess, she had lots of people to do everything for her. People to mow the lawns, people to cook her breakfast. She even had people to make her bed. And you would imagine that this would have made her rude and spoilt, but she was a kind and generous and good-hearted princess. "I am so lucky to be a princess. I must spread my luck around," she would say to herself every morning. And she did this by trying to help people. She sent a chef to cook meals for Little Miss Sunshine when she heard that Little Miss Sunshine had the flu. When she overheard Mr. Busy complaining how busy he was, she sent a gardener to mow his lawn. And she sent a maid to Little Miss Neat's house when she heard that Little Miss Neat had worn out her mop. All of this was very useful and everyone was very grateful, but Little Miss Princess did not feel that she was really doing anything to help. So when she heard that Mr. Bum had broken his leg, she rushed round to his house to see what she could do. "I haven't got any groceries," said Mr. Bum. "You could go to the shops for me." So Little Miss Princess went to the shops, but because she was a princess, she had never been shopping. She went into the baker's. "6 sausages, please," she said to the baker. "We don't have any sausages," said the baker. She went to the butcher's and asked for peas. "We don't have any peas," said the butcher. And she went into the greengrocer's and asked for a loaf of bread. "We don't have any bread," said the greengrocer. So she went back to Mr. Bum's house with an empty shopping basket. "The shops have sold out of everything," she explained to Mr. Bum. "Everything?" said a puzzled Mr. Bum. "Yes, the butcher had no peas, the baker had no sausages, and the greengrocer said he didn't have any bread." "Ah," said Mr. Bum, realizing what had happened. "Why don't you try the supermarket?" Sometime later, Little Miss Princess returned with the shopping. She offered to help put everything away, but because she was a princess, she had never unpacked the shopping. She put the sausages in the cupboard, the frozen peas in the bread bin, the bread in the drawer, and the milk in the oven. Whoops! After she had put the shopping away, Little Miss Princess offered to clean Mr. Bum's house. But because she was a princess, she had never cleaned anything before. She dusted the dishes, she polished the lounge, and she mopped the carpet. Oh no! Little Miss Princess then went upstairs to make Mr. Bum's bed, but because she was a princess, she had never made a bed. Oh dear! For dinner, they had burnt sausages with burnt potatoes. She even burnt the peas. "Oh dear," said Little Miss Princess, throwing the burnt meal away. "I'm just no good at anything." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," said Mr. Bum. "I'm sure you are good at all sorts of things." "Like what?" sniffed Little Miss Princess. "I know," said Mr. Bum. "Why don't you ring for a pizza?" "What will that prove?" asked Little Miss Princess. "Well," said Mr. Bum, "you are very good at giving orders." Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the story. For more exciting stories, please remember to like and subscribe at the Storyteller channel. Bye for now! Hello and welcome to the Storyteller channel. In today's story time, I will be reading you a book called Little Miss Naughty Worries Mr. Worry by Roger Hargreaves. Little Miss Naughty Worries Mr. Worry. Little Miss Naughty is quite the naughtiest person that I know. Take the other day for example. She tied Mr. Tall's shoelaces together. And she took Mr. Dizzy into the maze and left him there. And she joined up all the dots on Miss Dotty's house. And she even picked on the worm who lived at the bottom of her garden. I think you would have to agree that she is probably the naughtiest person you know. Then one day, little Miss Naughty met Mr. Worry. Now, Mr. Worry is the sort of person who worries about everything. Absolutely everything. Let's have some fun, suggested Miss Naughty, after they had introduced themselves. Mr. Worry was worried that if he said no, he might offend Miss Naughty, so he said yes. But he was still worried what fun somebody called Miss Naughty might get up to. And as you have seen, he was right to worry. Miss Naughty led him to Mr. Tickle's house. "Let's ring Mr. Tickle's doorbell and run away," she giggled. "Oh, I don't know," said Mr. Worry. "Mr. Tickle might be in the bath." "Even better," laughed Miss Naughty. "But then he would be all wet, and he might slip, and he might fall down the stairs, and he might bump his head, and then there wouldn't be anybody to call the doctor because he would have run away." Up to this point, little Miss Naughty had never worried about anything in her entire life. But now, when she thought about what Mr. Worry had said, ringing Mr. Tickle's doorbell and running away suddenly didn't seem such a good idea after all. "Come on," she said, "I've got a better idea." They walked over to Mr. Uppity's house. "Why don't we let his tires down?" chuckled little Miss Naughty. Mr. Worry looked worried. But what if Mr. Uppity didn't notice he had flat tires until he drove on the road, and then he might get stuck, and then a fire engine might come along, and it might not be able to get past, and then it couldn't put out the fire, gasped Mr. Worry. "Oh," said Miss Naughty, "I hadn't thought of that." She had thought of something else though, and off they went. But it didn't matter what she thought up. Mr. Worry could think of something to worry about, which then gave little Miss Naughty something to worry about. They didn't push Mr. Bounce off the gates because he might have bounced up in a tree and never been able to get down. They didn't scatter little Miss Scatterbrain's marbles because she might have got upset if they had been lost. Little Miss Naughty was distraught, all those wonderful naughty ideas going to waste, and then she had another idea. She tripped up Mr. Worry. He fell flat on his face. "What did you do that for?" said Mr. Worry. "I might have rolled down the hill, and I might have fallen in the river, and then I might have caught a cold, and I might have had to stay in bed all week." Little Miss Naughty looked at Mr. Worry. "But you didn't," she said, and ran off giggling mischievously. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the story. For more exciting stories, please remember to like and subscribe at the Storyteller channel. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to the Storyteller channel. In today's story time, I will be reading you a book called Little Miss Scatterbrain Sets Off for the Sun by Roger Hargreaves. Little Miss Scatterbrain sets off for the sun. Little Miss Scatterbrain is the sort of person who gets everything mixed up. Like the morning she hung slices of bread from the washing line and put her handkerchiefs in the bread bin. Like the afternoon, she vacuumed the lawn and mowed the carpets. And like the evening when she wanted to watch her favorite television program, she turned on the radio instead. Little Miss Scatterbrain is so scatterbrained that she forgets where her own front door is. Have you ever heard of anything so scatterbrained? This story is about the time that she went on her summer holiday. Little Miss Scatterbrain, as you can imagine, is not very good at organizing holidays. The year before last, she went skiing but ended up on the beach. And last year she went camping and packed an electric kettle. This year she was determined that nothing would go wrong, and to make sure that nothing did go wrong, she asked her friends to help her. Mr. Clever helped to book her summer holiday. Little Miss Splendid helped her shop for her holiday. Little Miss Tidy helped her pack. Mr. Rush took her to the station. And Mr. Strong carried her luggage onto the train. Nothing could go wrong. Or that's what Little Miss Scatterbrain thought. However, something did go wrong, and that something was Little Miss Scatterbrain getting off at the wrong station. She crossed the road and went into the hotel opposite the station. "Good morning," she said, even though it was the afternoon. "My name is Miss Scatterbrain." The hotel manager looked down his list of guests, but there was no booking in her name, and of course there wouldn't be. Little Miss Scatterbrain was in the wrong town, and because she was in the wrong town, she had to be in the wrong hotel. "That's odd," she said as she came out of the hotel. "Never mind, I'll go down to the beach." She asked the next person she met where the beach was. "Sorry, there's no beach here," came the reply. "That's odd," she said for the second time that day. As she stood in the street wondering what to do, somebody else walked by and said, "Looks like a snow." Miss Scatterbrain looked up at the sky, and as she did, a large snowflake floated down and landed on her nose. "That's odd," she said for the third time that day. A week later, back from her holiday, Little Miss Scatterbrain met Mr. Clever. "Hello," said Mr. Clever. "Did you enjoy your holiday?" "Yes," said Miss Scatterbrain. "Do you want to see my photos?" And she showed Mr. Clever her holiday snaps. Not surprisingly, Mr. Clever was rather surprised. "That's odd. Where did you go?" he asked. "It began with an S," said Miss Scatterbrain. "I know. I booked it for you," said Mr. Clever. "You went to Seat Town." "No," said Miss Scatterbrain. Let me think. Oh, I know. It was Shivertown." "I should have guessed," smiled Mr. Clever. "By the way, did you get my postcard?" "No, but I did get your postcard meant for Miss Splendid," chuckled Mr. Clever. "That's odd," said Miss Scatterbrain, "but I don't think there's anything odd about that. Do you?" Thank you so much for listening. For more exciting stories, please remember to like and subscribe at the Storyteller channel. Bye for now.
No.
The end. And that's the end of our story time. For more bedtime stories, you can check on our YouTube playlist or listen to more Storytime compilations at the Storyteller Fox. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.